As Bobby said, I am Carrie. I'm here tonight to give my testimony. But as I was putting this together, I realized I had a lot of people asking me, what is a testimony? So I'm kind of a nerd. I had to find out what the actual definition of that was. It's evidence or proof provided by the existence or appearance of something. That's what a testimony is. So this is my testimony of who God has been, who He currently is, and who He is to be in my life. First thing I can say is I am not a speaker. I am super nervous. This is something for me that is very, very vulnerable. There's a lot of my story that was hard. But I hope as you hear the words that you don't see me standing up here, that you don't hear me speaking these words, but that you see Him. In every moment of my life, He's been there. You're going to get just a snapshot of where He has presented Himself in my life, but I know for a fact He's never left. He's always been present from the beginning. He knew me in my mother's womb. That's where He formed me. So as you hear the words, I hope that you can remember that and lock that away in your heart, that this isn't about me and my journey. It is about who He is. I just want to share a couple of verses that you'll probably see throughout my journey that really spoke to me and that I had to turn on a lot. 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. Galatians 5:13, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge in the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. So just going to kind of start out my story. As a young child, I went to church with my parents, but mostly with my grandma. My grandma spoke a lot in my young years. She lived with us. I remember every time I went into the apartment where she lived, she always had her Bible open. And anytime I had trouble, she always knew exactly where to go in the Bible. She could quote it to me, whether it was in discipline or in love. And she definitely had to do both a lot. She was a comfort and stability in my house. That my house was just a little bit of chaos. My mom had been diagnosed with MS when I was very young. And so my grandma came to help. I was 2 when my mom was diagnosed, and before that there had been a lot of time that they just didn't know what was going on, and as a 2-year-old I didn't know anything about it, but I do remember my grandma being that constant in my life. She was strict, but man, she was loving. You knew where the line was with her. She took us to church regularly, and I remember a lot of times I would sit in the pew, and we had those hymnals that had the ribbon, and there were always 3 of them. That's how I learned how to braid. So that's what I remember. I sat in church with her, and I would braid the hymnal, and she was really someone that you could tell just really, really loved the Lord, prayed over us, even when I didn't know what was going on. She was the Word outside of church. She was what first showed me who God was. My grandma moved out. I think I was in middle school when she moved out. And it was really hard for me because that's what I knew growing up. That's where I went. She used to always laugh at me because I could smell when she was making the dough for something. She didn't even have to be baking it, but I could smell it. And she always laughed, and she's like, 'cause that was my favorite part, was getting the little extra, whether it be bread or cinnamon rolls were my favorite. But when she left, I remember there was a hole. Even now I can feel the hole when she left and moved out. After that, we really didn't attend church regularly. We would go on the major holidays, but it never really followed us home. It wasn't something that was lived out. We showed up, kind of checked those boxes. We showed up on occasions, and it felt more like a show, honestly, like we were kind of checking the boxes. Yeah, we did that. We showed up, we went, it was a Christmas service, you know. So it didn't really hit home for me. It didn't come home with me. Confirmation, I went through confirmation. I grew up Lutheran, and my poor pastor, he put up with a lot from me, a lot of questions. I had lots of questions. And I was the one that didn't do the memory verse and would try to like hide it in the inside of my shirt and look at it as I was trying to do it. Yep, I was that girl. I just remember he was so patient with me and so kind and so loving, no matter what the questions I asked, and I asked some tough ones. But for me at that point in time, church was, you show up, you do what they had in the bulletin, you check that box, you went home, and then you just kept living life. In high school, I got talked into taking a friend of mine to Young Life, which was super fun, geared 100% towards our youth, the high school kids. She wanted to go to meet with a boy, and I was her ride. So that's kind of how that started. And God knew exactly how to speak to me through that. He got me there through that, but I ended up in a camp, a Young Life camp, my sophomore year in high school, and that's where I fully committed and gave my life to the Lord. And I first kind of started realizing that you live church outside of the church walls, that you could worship Him and it'd be fun. It could be silly. They did a lot of skits that kind of showed who He was through the skits, but felt like a lot of times it was just speaking right to me. It really, really was a turning point for me in viewing who God was and who I was in Him. After that, I came back from camp, and man, that was hard. You go to camp and you come back and you're on this high. And I remember my leader, Debbie. I'll never forget Debbie. She used to meet me at Burger King when I had all the questions, but she told me when we got back there was going to be a low point in it because you are so high when you're there. You're so filled with the Spirit, which I didn't know what the Spirit was at the time, but man, it was just moving. And when you come back, it's like, what now? What do you do now? You're thrown back into the world, really, into the flesh. And I didn't know what that was at the time. And I came back and she met with me religiously once a week at Burger King, answered all the questions I had. And at one point, I asked my dad to do more with Young Life. And he came back to me with, and this is heartbreaking for me, that I no longer could attend because he thought it was a cult. It was scary for him, I'm sure, to see the changes that I had made in such a short time. But looking back, it's just heartbreaking because I was really on fire. And when I got home, it was just crushed. That was hard. He told me I could no longer meet with Debbie. He didn't feel like she was good for me. At that point, I didn't know where to go. I was very lost. I had filled something in myself. I found the Lord. I found that thing that was missing in my life. And I felt like it was ripped away. My dad was someone in my life that I just wanted to please. And was a person that I also could never please. I never felt like I made him happy in anything I did, or it was always a performance. It could never just be who I was. But even looking back on all of that, I know that God used that. He used that time to make me stronger. He now use that time when I was looking back, even just reading or writing my testimony, looking back on it. He has met me where I was, even in those moments, even in those lowest moments. He was there. He showed up and he held me. He protected me when I had no idea what was going on. Continuing on my home life, it was, like I was saying, it was a performance. I was always falling short. I'm a people pleaser. I love to see people happy. I love to see people excited. And those were two things that didn't happen a whole lot in my house. So I was always performing. I never had a place to just go and fall and not be okay. I always had to put on a strong face and take care of things that a lot of kids that I was going to high school with didn't have to take care of. My mom was going through a lot. She was going through a lot of changes with her body that she had no idea what they were. So my sisters and I had to pick up a lot of the slack. We were the ones cooking dinner every night. We were the ones that she would drop off of the door at Walmart, send in with a whole list, and we'd get everything and come back, load it in the car, unload it. It was things that my friends didn't understand or have to deal with, so I felt like it set me apart in that way also. So I was never in a safe place at home. Young life for me was that social, but loving, safe atmosphere, and it had kind of been ripped away from me. But God didn't stop there. Even though it was kind of taken away from me, He still continued to put people in my life. There were a lot of teachers through my life. There were a couple of principals and assistant principals that really spoke into my life, and I had one choir teacher actually that he used to sit me down and be like, Carrie, you really thinking about this decision? And those people that took the time probably will never know how much that means to a kid that didn't have that at home and doesn't have that at home. God knew what He was doing. None of it was a surprise to Him. He protected me through all of it. There were a lot of things that went on in middle school for me. I went through a period of really dark, and just to get real, made a lot of bad decisions. Hung out with the wrong people, did the wrong things. And even through that, I can look back and say, I don't know how I made it through that, but the only way is God. He was there through all of it. My junior year, I met my, later on to become my husband. And that didn't go over well with my parents. I ended up my junior year moving out one time. The first time I moved out, I moved in with a friend and her mom. And it was very confusing. It was very hard. It was hard for a teenager to grasp that they didn't have a place to go, that they could feel loved and comforted and just free to be themselves. I came back after some discussion with family. My sisters became involved, and my mom and dad promised to go to counseling, and I did. I went to counseling for a year. My mom came to the first one, and my dad didn't come to any. My boyfriend, who became my husband later, took me to every single one of them, sat in the parking lot while I was in, and I remember just being angry. Why am I here? I mean, this isn't just about me, right? And I was angry. So I ended up moving out again, and this time I moved in with my boyfriend and his parents, his mom and stepdad, and lived a period of time and until I graduated and we got married. Got married at 19. I remember after moving out, just him moving in with him and his mom, I kind of felt relieved. It wasn't necessarily a safe place I could go, but it was safer than what I felt like I was in. So it was kind of, to me, like the lesser of two evils. I knew in my heart I wasn't doing the right thing, but I didn't know what to do. So after graduation, Bobby and I were married, and kind of thought that marriage would fix it. To be honest with you, we were living in sin. We had moved out from his mom's house at that point after I graduated, living in sin. And while at that time I wasn't attending church, I still knew it was wrong. I knew the order of things, how God says that you're supposed to do it. But I thought marriage would fix that. Our relationship, even in high school and as it was going, was rocky. I felt like I was more trying to keep him happy all the time, in that emotion, and so it was just kind of another hat that I was wearing, another role I was performing, another person I was just trying to please. I also now know, I know now how wrong the saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," because it's not true. Our words mean something. How we talk to each other, it means something. We were married about a year, and one of the things that Bobby was really good at was coming up with these great ideas of where we should go and the dreams for our life. And I know that was God and him giving us a purpose to keep going. Our first adventure took us to Wyoming. He found a school there that he really thought that would be fun, and I just think Wyoming's fun. So I was along for the ride. I really just wanted to be along for the ride. I really just wanted to see him happy and successful, and so we did. We picked up and moved everything. A lot easier to move without kids. We were out there for about 2 years, and he went to school. In that time, I met some amazing people that I still am able to be in contact with now. But still, God was really not in our lives. I mean, Sunday was a rest day for us, that we did nothing, or wasn't even really a thought to go to church. Bobby's view on the church was that we didn't have to be there. So we didn't really go to church in Wyoming, but it was an adventure. We got to do some really cool stuff and see, now looking back, God's beauty just in nature. I learned a lot about myself and moving away from family. I had never been out of Cape Girardeau. Really, I mean, I moved to Jackson, but other than that, I didn't travel. We didn't travel. So, I mean, we went big when we went first, went all the way to Wyoming. So, he finished up school there and found another school he wanted to attend in Texas. So here we go. We picked up, moved everything to Texas. We had no house. We had sold everything except for a small U-Haul. We did have a dog at that time, so it was a little bit harder. But we moved into a hotel, just what we called living on a hope and a prayer. That we would find jobs and just figure it out as we went. And we did. And we found this amazing place to live, that I was able to have horses in the backyard. And he attended school full time. I worked full time. And I got to meet some really amazing neighbors that showed me a light into what family was. And looking back on it now, it was really a time when I realized what it was like to have kids, or what it would be like to have kids, and the joy that they bring into your life. Our neighbors, the neighbor kids came over a lot, and we did, and Bobby was gone a lot, so it was really me and the kids, and I would ride horses with them, and I went out and fed the horses with them, and then after I got my own horse, I was able to train and do a lot of different stuff with them. So in that time, man, God was working, I just didn't know it. And I wasn't even acknowledging him, and that to me now is heartbreaking to think of how much work he did without me even acknowledging it. So just a testimony to how much he cares about us, really, no matter where we are. About 2 years, Bobby finished up school, and we decided we wanted to move again. So he found a job that was like a dream job for him. So off to Georgia we went. Georgia was the big one for us to move, because that was kind of like, he was in school at first. We knew they were kind of temporary. Going to Georgia was one where we've started to think about laying down roots and, buying a house, and what would it look like to have kids, and starting those dreams, The job that Bobby got in Georgia, he traveled a lot. It was like 42 weeks a year that he traveled, so he was gone a lot. I was in a new place, a new job, and knew absolutely no one. I felt really alone, so I really threw myself into the project. So we bought a house, and I was like, well, if you're gonna be gone a lot, let's find a fixer-upper. Yeah. That was my first mistake. I learned how much I don't know. But it was also a big learning experience for me in making a house a home. Everywhere else we had been, we had rented. So I really couldn't make it my own. I didn't get to pick out the colors of the walls and new flooring and all of that fun stuff. So I got to make this house our first home. We were there about 8 months, and we decided, let's start talking about having kids. That was kind of the next step, playing out your dreams. This is the order they go, right? You buy a house, you have kids. So once we started talking about doing that, we were like, well, maybe we should find a church. If we're gonna have kids, we want to teach them about God. So we found a church and plugged into that church and got into an amazing group, a small group that was in the same stage of life that we were. And here it was where some of the pieces that God had been placing in my life, those, I call them my thumbprints, of where he put his thumbprints in my life over the time in Wyoming, over the time in Texas, and now as we've moved to Georgia, I started really kind of figuring out who I was and who I was in him, to the point of how much he loves me. And I was kind of figuring out, I really loved people. I really enjoyed the social aspect of it, and it took up some time while Bobby was gone. We tried for about 3 years to get pregnant. And with him being gone so much, that was hard. We thought it would be one of those things, okay, we want to have kids, here we go. It's gonna happen just like that, right? It did not happen just like that for us. It was a journey. It was a time where I was able to lean on my small group that God had placed in our life. It was a time that God showed me patience, And while at the time I just wanted it to happen, I'm so thankful that he did. I'm so thankful that he took the time and knows that perfect timing. I was not patient about it. It was heartbreaking every month to find out that I was not pregnant. It was heartbreaking. And it was a wedge between Bobby and I. It was something I wanted so badly, and he was just doing because it was the next step, I felt like sometimes. And it was me that was putting a lot of pressure on myself. After about 3 years, I decided I'd just give up. Like, we're not gonna have kids, not in the cards, I gotta figure something else out. About a month later, found out we were pregnant. It's kind of how it goes. And we were so excited. We were just over the moon to have finally, got this dream, and now we're gonna have kids. We had prepared the house, and during that time, Bobby lost his job. I had to take you kind of back a little bit. Bobby had always kind of spoke about himself then in a way that he always told me he would never live past 36. And I always kind of blew it off, it's kind of like, it's just what he's saying. When he lost his job and I was pregnant, it did a number. It rocked his world. It was hard. I can remember coming home, looking everywhere for him. I had no idea. And found him in the shower with a gun. That was the first time it got real for me. He had talked about it. He used to, and I'm sorry, this is kind of intense, but he used to tell me all the time he'd eat a bullet. And I was always like, don't say that, don't say that. And I just kind of blew it off. That's the first time it got real. That's the first time that as we were building this dream that we thought we had, that I was like, this is not how it's supposed to be. This is not how it's supposed to be. His words to me after were that, it's like, why the shower? Like, why? As we talked about it, and he didn't want to make a mess. He didn't want me to have to clean up a mess, and he wanted to keep the house enough so that the baby that we were bringing into this world wouldn't have to make. That was the first time that I saw he was not the strong man he let everybody think he was. And I had no idea what to do. He was the man that didn't want to talk about his feelings ever. And if you brought it up, he's like, that's just weak. I don't have to talk about my feelings. I'm gonna push it down, and it doesn't exist. It was real, and I had no idea where to go. We had just joined a new church, and we weren't as plugged in as we were at the other church. So the church, our small group, had kind of broken up, and so I was completely lost. I had nowhere to go, but God didn't leave us there. We got plugged into a new small group, and the people there welcomed us in, and really, the women in that group, I couldn't have made it through as far as I did without them. anytime I had a need, I knew that there was nothing too big or too small that they wouldn't take care of. And that's where I see God. There's nothing too big or too small that you can't take to him. That's what the people in that small group showed me. And it was no accident. He was there. He was working through them. During that time, we had another baby boy, a year and 4 days after the first one was born. And it was hard. That was hard on my body. And Bobby was still not dealing with any of the emotions he had. And we drifted further and further apart. I try not to look back at those days because I haven't really unpacked those yet. It was just a broken relationship. And we grew further and further apart as we couldn't share in the pain that we both had and the chaos that was having 2 kids. And the words hurt more and more. After being in Georgia for about 8 years, we decided that it was time to move back closer to family to get some help. As far as like with the kids, it's hard to have 2 kids that young. And he had switched jobs, into which he was working a lot of hours. He was working 3 months on days, 3 months on nights, and the schedule was crazy. So once again, as I unpacked this in my testimony, I realized he spoke and I thought I was listening, but I only heard he wanted to move. I didn't hear his plea to sell the house and try to stay there until it was time for him to move. There were some credentials and credits that he needed to get before we could move. And all I heard was sell the house and move. And that's what I focused on. So I did. I got our house on the market, ready to go. Sold the house, which meant that Bobby was gonna spend 3 months in Georgia while the boys and I came and lived with Vicki and Lance. Through all of this, we never really consulted with God. We were just doing what felt right. Doing what we felt was best, what we thought was best. But we never stopped and asked God, where were we supposed to be? What were we supposed to be doing? When the boys and I moved up here, I was so blessed to be able to come here. And Vicki got me plugged in, going to some of the classes that you guys have on Wednesday night. And the one that really started off and got me going and back into where my focus should have been, which should have been the Lord the whole time. But it was the Armor of God study that we did. In that one, as I was spending more time in the Word, Bobby's and our communication got worse and worse. He would get angry with me about how much time I was spending in it, which then had me so confused again. I felt like I was back at that point with my dad, where it was just, what am I supposed to do? And to me, honoring my husband meant doing what he said, for the most part. And so I was so confused. He didn't let me quit. And I know that there were people right, even when I didn't know it. 3 months later, Bobby moved up. We lived with Vicky for a little while, and then we found a house in Ellisville to rent. He got a job in Pacific, and I remember one morning, you probably remember the story, but Vicky and I were taking Cohen, my youngest, to daycare, and we were talking about Bobby and his job interviews and things like that. And Cohen said, my dad's gonna work on monster trucks. And I was like, okay. He wasn't planning on going to a interview for anything that had to do with mechanics or anything. I mean, he had a background in mechanics, but he had zero plans. He was looking for a job as a police officer. And Vicky and I were like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, buddy. Later that afternoon, I get a text message from Bobby. He got a job with Bigfoot. And I was like, really? And that shows you right there, God speaks through everybody. I think Cohen was 7, maybe 8, 7. I don't remember. He had no idea what was really going on, you know. But that to me was another one of those thumbprints where God was like, here I am. I'm right here, I've never left. Thinking that a job would bring our marriage a little bit closer. It did not. Didn't take the stress off. And to be completely real, our marriage was in shambles. He had not stayed faithful in our marriage and was lost and broken. And I had no idea what to do. But I do know that the foundation that I found in the classes and the time that I spent here, I posted scripture everywhere. I prayed constantly. I had people praying for us. I had people praying with us. And I did everything I could to try to keep our marriage together, to try to get our marriage on the right track. I came home one Sunday after church to find his things laid out on the counter. And the bedroom door closed. And I had no idea what to do. And then I walked up to the door and I heard him talking. And it was just like a weight. His sister had called him. He decided in those moments she needed to talk to him. He had planned on committing suicide that day. But his sister called him and talked to him until I came home. God doesn't leave us. God fights for us. Our marriage, our finances, our whole life was in a whirlwind. The one thing that kept me stable and grounded were the words that my sister would speak over me. The words that God gave her to speak over me. and to remind me who I am, and that God wasn't gone, that He was in all of it. In June, Bobby decided he would move out, and that we would start the process of divorce. During the lowest points, I remember crying out to the Lord, asking for healing and reconciliation in the marriage. I was crushed. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Labor Day weekend, Bobby had moved out, and he had taken the boys, and he was bringing them back early. And I just remember I couldn't wait to see my boys, but he was texting during that whole time, and I knew something was wrong, but I also knew that I had to make a change. We were in a cycle, and I had to make a change. He brought the boys home, and I remember he wasn't going to say goodbye to Keegan, my oldest, and I fought him to stay there until I could get Keegan so he could say goodbye, because I knew something wasn't right. Lord, give me strength. I don't know that I'll ever forget some of the details of that weekend. I still today, almost 3.5 years later, I have to give to the Lord because I can't change Him. Like that night, after the night he had dropped the boys off, I received a text from him saying that he was sorry for everything and the way he had treated me, and asking me to take care of the kids. I still have that text because I can't bring myself to leave it. We text back and forth for a little while. In the meantime, my mom and dad were at my house. We had called the police department, and Vicky was on her way to take me to his apartment. I grabbed my Bible and my mom and Vicky, and I drove to the apartment. The police had already gotten there, and I remember running out to the police officers that stood there. The rest of that time was 4 hours or so. I spent on my knees praying in the parking lot, just praying for him to walk out. But when we pulled up, I had heard the gunshot. At one point, a TV crew showed up, and so I had approached an officer there and asked them if he could ask them to leave, because I couldn't imagine Bobby walking out of that apartment having to see the TV crew, and I didn't. I didn't want to see that. As I stood there with the officer, they sent a flash bomb in, and there was a moment when the officer told me that the code that came over the radio was good news. And I got this little bit of hope that he was going to be walking out at night. the head SWAT officer was walking my direction and gave me the news. I can't imagine how hard it would be to deliver news like that. Because I know for me, I was screaming at him. I was shaking him, telling him it wasn't true. But God was there that night. He hadn't left me. As the night went on, it was full of phone calls that I had to make, letting people know that Bobby was gone. And then God gave me a blessing. He told me to go pray for those men that had just had to walk into an apartment and then come out and tell a family that they had lost a loved one. And as I prayed with them, God was there. Even though Bobby didn't come out alive, God was there. The days and the weeks after, after I got home, God was with me and guided me to do research on how to tell a 6 and a 7-year-old that their dad wasn't with us anymore. The Lord showed up on that trampoline as I sat with them and told them that their dad was gone. He gave me the words I needed to tell those 2 sweet boys exactly what they needed to hear. God was there, and the fact that their hearts were open enough to receive it and trust that God was going to take care of us. In this moment, there was one set of footprints in the sand, and that was Jesus carrying me. Because there's no other way that I would have made it through the days and the weeks. There were so many details and arrangements and chaos that was left. But God wasn't surprised in any of it. He had already taken care of the details. He had already placed those people in that place for that time. My sister with her greenie, she had a special book that we called Greenie that kept all the details that had to happen. Jimmy, helping us picking out a plot that was able to bring us some laughter and some joy in a moment of just pure agony. God knew what he was doing. Even if it didn't look like what I thought it should look like, he was right there. He was in the police officer that showed up when I had to go to an apartment to clean out that had girlfriend stuff in it. He was there with the officer because I had to take Keegan because he wouldn't go anywhere else. And that officer took Keegan to the playground and slid down the slide with him and played with him on the playground to give him memories that he's gonna need to replace some of those hard ones. I had family and friends that spent countless number of hours feeding us, just pretty much saying, Carrie, you have to go in this direction. Praying for us, cleaning up, because I was literally just surviving. But God took care of every one of those details. When I'm lonely, God shows up in a 9-year-old asking me to go on a date with him and asking if he can pay out of the money that he saved. Or a note in the sock drawer telling me that he loves me. God wasn't surprised by any of this. He also never left our sides. In every moment, he was there. He prepared us and gave us exactly what we needed in every moment. He gave Keegan the teacher he needed as he struggled with understanding what his next steps were. I can look back at so many fingerprints that he's left on my life. And they're unique, special fingerprints that he left just for me. He loves and adores each one of us that much. Even in my anger or my questioning of why this has to happen or why this did happen to us, God was there, took every word. He sat with me, he cried with me, and he held me as I unpack and continue to unpack all the feelings and the confusion. I continue to unpack some of the details he gives me, and he gives them to me as I'm ready to hear them. The latest one for me was really a tough one to get through, but also truly is so simple in a thought. I wrestled hard, and I wrestle hard when I hear the survivor stories of people that were going to commit suicide or have committed suicide, and just before they pull the trigger, or if the gun doesn't go off, or just before they jump, they hear God's voice and God saved them. But on the other hand, to be completely real with you, I felt, why didn't you do this for Bobby? His answer to me, he was there. He was crying out for his son. All Bobby had to do was reach out for his hand, and he was there. Because God loves Bobby more than I could. He didn't leave him. He'll never leave us. My testimony's not over. A testimony is truly always in progress. We're always changing, and my walk with the Lord is always changing. He's always chipping things off and changing things in me and showing me more and more who he is. So in the beginning, I kind of shared a couple of the verses that kind of got me through, but honestly, music is what got me through. Worshiping and just being able to cry out to him in song is a lot of what got me through. And a couple of the songs that got me through, and I'll just I'll name the song and tell you a little bit about them and how they got me through. The first one is Known by Torn Wells. He reminded me over and over and over again with that song who I am in him, and that he knows everything. He knows the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, and he still loves me completely. Hills and Valleys is another one by Torn Wells, and he reminds me in that where I am is a season. There'll be hills, there'll be valleys, and he's not going anywhere. He's always gonna be on that hill, he's gonna be in that valley with me, and he'll be working right next to me. Grace Got You by Mercy Me is one of my favorites because it's one I can't, when I hear it, I have to smile and I have to dance. It reminds me to dance and praise out to him. Move, Keep Walking by Toby Mac. That was one when I'd get up in the morning and I really just didn't want to be awake. I really just wanted to go back to bed and pretend like none of it had happened. But it reminded me to keep moving forward. And I Will by Hillary Scott. So the words are, I know you see me, I know you hear me, but it's his will, not mine. I had talked to my boys about coming up, and Keegan tonight told me that he didn't like hearing the story, which I can't blame him. So he asked me to share something he had wrote that he wanted to share. This is a little bit about his testimony, and he is 10. When my dad died, I had to take anxiety medicine. I would get up late at night and throw pillows at my mom because I was mad. I said it was my fault that he died because I thought I was a bad kid and I was not loved. I tried to run away from school. I didn't know what to do. It was so hard. But God was still there, and he was making me new in him. In January of this year, I felt God in our after-church worship songs. They lifted me up, and we prayed for others, and I felt the Lord there, and I wanted to change. This is hard for me, because it's hard to change, because I like it right now. But we must change to be more like God. Keegan did struggle with anxiety. He was on anxiety medicine, but he fought hard, and he was prayed over, and he was able to come off that anxiety medicine. He knows that God has never left him, and it's because of the people that God has placed in his life. I know that my testimony is not over. I know my journey is not over. But I also know that God's never going to leave me. No matter what comes, he's never going to leave me.